Off the coast of Washington state, the San Juan Islands offer America's last bastion against man-made pollution. Most of these pristine bays and channels are accessible only by seaplane or ferry, which excludes the hurried and worried of the world. It's not a setting where you'd expect to find the most obsessively intense coach in NFL history, but it's here that Don Coryell has decided to build his retirement home.
Hello? Hey, just fine, but you're too late, you know. We drank the wine, we ate the crab. You should have called a little sooner.
Near Friday Harbor, Washington, Don Coryell has found a haven far from the pressures of NFL sidelines, where in St. Louis, then San Diego, his fiery passion for the game took him to the top, then nearly engulfed him. After 33 years as a head football coach, Coryell has earned his place in this enchanted forest.
And there's so many places to walk, trails everywhere. It's really beautiful. We never cut down any limbs, don't believe in cutting down trees and limbs. You just have to push them aside. We like climbing stairs, and we'll do it for exercise. We'll come up and down here 12, 15 times. It's a lot of steps, 31 up this first level. Here's the Douglas fir, and right up on top of that tree, and usually you can see it, is an eagle's nest. You'll see them standing on limbs up there. They'll be exercising their arms. Well, I originally wanted to be a forest ranger. That's what I went into when I first started school. And then I just was not interested in all the trees and all the grasses of Montana. So I went into PE and decided to coach, and I loved it. I loved the people. I am working with the players, the coaches. Just nothing better than being under the gun and working under pressure.
In 1973, Don Coryell put the pressure squarely on NFL defenses when he was hired by the St. Louis Cardinals and brought along a passing fancy that had been years in the making.
When he came to the Cardinals in '73 from San Diego State, he brought with him a passing game that the league had not seen before. And Don Coryell single-handedly opened up the National Football League. I would say half the teams in the league now are using either his passing game intact or a derivative of such.
And Don would always be yelling, "Throw it, throw it." I mean, it'd be 3rd down in inches or 4th down in inches, and he'd come running down to the huddle that we had, timeout, and he'd say, "Throw it, throw it," and say, "Okay, Don, okay, throw it, throw it." He wanted to throw it every down.
In St. Louis, they called his wide open ways the cardiac cards. In San Diego, it was Air Coryell. And overnight, both teams were transformed from losers to winners.
I'd say he has got to be in the top handful of coaches to ever coach, because he did it at every level. And he would go in and take programs that were totally down, turn them right around. And the amazing thing about him, and the lesson we can learn from this is, he was the most down-to-earth, no ego, extremely honest, but just tremendously intense. When he got ready for a game, as if he was going to play the game. And he projected that to the players.
I likened his eyes and the expression to the very cardinal on the helmet that we wore. I mean, it's kind of a beady look, and you look at that cardinal logo sometime and look at that eye.
I guess when I concentrate on something very strongly, I do have a very grim and very terrible look on my face. I'm really not pain.
These days, the classic Coryell game face is applied only to salmon fishing in Puget Sound.
I think there's something nibbling.
In our stadium, sometimes he'd just flip the light off, and he'd go, "Listen to him." You know, you go like that, and everybody would be, you know, that never happened to you. You know, you're going, "The lights are off." You're sitting in there, you know. Well, you hear the other coach up there talking, the other team yelling and screaming, you know what I mean? He goes, "Listen to him." And he'd be, you know, and then when he flipped those lights back on, you're going, everybody's like this. Don found a way to hate the other team before that ball was snapped. You hated them.
Oh, there's no question. No question about there's some teams I hated. Yeah, I build up hatreds, real hatreds, against just a few. I like people for what they are, and I dislike them for what they are.
Even in retirement, the wounds had not healed. and the pain is still near the surface.
Oh, I gave my life to football. You bet I did. It's just that I knew I was hypertensive. God almighty, I knew I had high blood pressure, and I was taking pills, and, you know, couldn't go to sleep at night. And yeah, I decided I better cool down a little bit and do the best I can, but I'm not going to die for football. I made up my mind those last few years I was not going to die on a football field. I had a lot to live for, and I wanted to have some fun.
Friday Harbor is the perfect place to heal. The dream home of Don and Lisa Coryell is nearly complete, and it's just far enough away to put both the past and the future in proper perspective.
I remember the good things. Very, very few bad things do I remember. I tend to wipe those from my mind. I think of the pleasant things. I think of the good guys, the wonderful people I've worked with. The hell with these autumn years. It's going to be a whole bunch more years I'm going to live. I'll be 108. I'll still be moving around. I think, because if I was on that boat, here's exactly what I'd say. Hey, look at that house. Oh boy, do I wish I lived there. I live here, and it's fun.
I'm John Madden. Condolences to the family. You know, I'm sitting down there in front, and I'm on the corner, and next to me is Joe Gibbs. Next to him is Dan Fouts. And the three of us are in the Hall of Fame because of Don Coryell. There's something missing. Didn't mean to start out that way. I met Don in one of the early 60 years, one or two. And, you know, we're talking about 50 years now. And it was at the Hall of Fame. It was at the Coach of the Year clinic. And John McKay from USC was the Coach of the Year that year. And he was speaking on the I formation. And they'd won a national championship, and the I formation was the hot thing then. I was coaching at Hancock College, and you know, John McKay and the I, we all were, you know, everything's a copycat. We all had to have it, and so I had to, you know, listen. You know, you're writing notes, you know, I formation, and then in the middle of his speech, he said, you know, he said the I formation isn't mine. He said, Don Coryell was an assistant of mine, and he brought the I formation to USC, and he put it in, and he's really the father of the I formation. So, and he introduced Don. And so I look over there and see where Don is. Now, after the thing's over, everyone runs up to the podium to get more out of John McKay and the I formation. I figured, hell, I'm going to go over and talk to the guy that taught the guy about the I formation. So I went over and talked to Don Coryell. And I sat with him the rest of the clinic. And he told me everything that I needed to know about the I formation. That, you know, he shared. And you know, you think of Air Coryell and all those things, but I think 50 years ago, Don Coryell invented the I formation. And we look at pro football today, and if you use two-back, everyone is still using the I formation. And, you know, so it's not only was, you know, his record and his college and his pros and his passing game, but there was a time where he was all about I formation power and running. and we all learned a lot from that. And, you know, Don was a football genius. And every genius has amazing concentration powers. And Don had amazing concentration powers. And when you have amazing concentration powers, you have some quirks that go with it. And everyone and every player that ever played for him, coached with him, knows some of those quirks. You know, like there was a time he's doing a game plan, he's sitting at his desk, he's writing, and food and eating wasn't a big deal to Don. He didn't have time, so he reaches down in a drawer and he pulls out an apple, and it's rotten. He ate like half of it 3 months ago, and he's writing, he's looking, and he takes a bite, and I said, Don, that's rotten. He goes, oh, you know, throws it in there. And he wasn't thinking about eating, he wasn't thinking about the apple. He was thinking about what he was doing, and his concentrative powers were amazing. He lived on top of a hill, and he had a long driveway, and then the street. So what would happen, on garbage day, he would put the garbage can in the back of his white station wagon. He had a white station wagon. He would drive it down to the bottom of the hill, you know, and then the quirks that go with concentration, that go with genius, he would make a right turn and drive the garbage to work 90% of the time. And then you talk about stink. We'd be in two-a-days right here at San Diego State, and after practice, Don would all go out to dinner, so we'd get in his car. And on one of those garbage days, man, you'd get in that car and you'd pass out. I mean, you would want to walk or run to dinner rather than ride with Don Coryell. And then he did the same thing. The other trick was, lived on top of the hill, and Elisa would come out with Mindy. Mindy was about 4 then. So the idea was Don would drive Mindy down the hill, let her off, she would walk back up, and Elisa would stand up and watch this whole thing and take her in the house. Well, just like the garbage, Mindy wanted to ride to school. She didn't want to stay home. So Mindy would get in the back and she would be quiet. So Don would get down there, forget Mindy was in it. Now this would happen at least twice a week. And Don would come in to work and he had Mindy. And then he would have to call Lisa and say, I'm sorry, honey, I'm sorry, I didn't, and I got Mindy. Well, of course, Elisa knew he had Mindy. Elisa was watching from up there and watching him take that right and not let Mindy off. He's waiting for her. So now poor Elisa, being the great wife she was, and she never said, all she did was smile, and she was one of the great people. And then she would drive and pick up Mindy, and Don would say, Mindy, and he loved Mindy like, you know, like you could tell that he loved his granddaughter. And, you know, he couldn't get mad at her, but, you know, he would just shake his head and he would apologize, then kind of get mad at Mindy. And then the whole thing would be like 2 or 3 days later, we'd have the same thing. But that was Don, and that was concentration, and that was from a genius. And that, you know, as I was saying, that we all owe so much to him. And you can tell the players and the coaches that if you ever played for him or you ever coached for Don, he had respect for you and he had love for you. And it was a respect and a love that didn't go away. One of the jobs that I had as a defensive coordinator and assistant was I was in charge of summer jobs. So all the players had to have summer jobs. So now what I would do is I would take the best summer job and then I would give it to the best player. Then the next summer job, the next best player, and the next best player. So anyway, the best job back in those days was at Coca-Cola. So I have the Coca-Cola job. And it was going to go to Haven Moses. He was our best player coming in. So Don comes up to me and he says, you got that job for Coca-Cola? I said, yeah, it's the best one we got. I'm going to give it to him, and he's the number one guy. And he said, no, give it to Rod Dowhauer. I go, Rod Dowhauer? He graduated. He can't play for us anymore. He's gone. Haven Moses is going to be, he's going to be our star. That's what we are. That's who we are. We need players. And he goes, no, he said, Rod just got cut by the 49ers. And he's married, and his wife's pregnant. Said he needs it. You know, I had never thought that way in my life. I mean, I never did. And Don, you know, as everyone says, was the greatest competitor. But where a lot of people do what's best for them, and a lot of times what's best for the team, Don did what was right. Don was right.